Quote from the book: "Global sourcing aims at selecting the most competitive suppliers worldwide." This may sound obvious, but it is still the case today that, for example, European companies use mostly European suppliers and US companies use mostly US suppliers, and so on. I never met the inventor of global sourcing, Ignacio Lopez, in person. But when I started my career in procurement consulting back in 1995, I worked with the team that 10 years prior had developed global sourcing with him at General Motors. In this video, I'm going to talk about what led to global sourcing in the first place and what role it can play in today's environment. Let's get started. The 1950s and 1960s were just great for US car makers. Bigger and bigger engines, all kinds of luxury features, crazy styling like fins and tons of chrome. And all of this came to a screeching halt with the 1973 oil crisis. After the Yom Kippur War, OPEC imposed an oil embargo on the US. The price of crude oil rose dramatically, as did the price of gas. The big cars made by GM, Ford and Chrysler were badly hit. In this moment of weakness, Toyota, Nissan and other Japanese companies saw an opportunity to capture the growing market for smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. And what really separated the Japanese automakers from their rivals was the quality and affordability of their products. This had everything to do with their manufacturing processes and their approach to procurement and suppliers. This can best be explained with Toyota's production system. You may have heard about Kanban, or just-in-time manufacturing, Kaizen, or continuous improvement, and Keiretsu, a collaborative network where Toyota bought significant majority stakes in key suppliers. Combined, the effect of these methods was remarkable. In 1970, Toyota's workers were each producing 38 vehicles per year. By contrast, Ford's workers were producing 12 per year and GM's workers just 8 per year. By the early 1980s, the US and European automakers were facing the full force of their Japanese rivals. And as they were not able to match the quality of Japanese cars, the US automakers chose to focus on radical cost-cutting programs. The most famous of these programs was GM's Global Sourcing. And it took an outsider like Ignacio Lopez to come up with this concept. He was an engineer, not a procurement expert. In the 1980s, his home base in Zaragoza in Spain was in the remote provinces of the automotive industry. And he was austere, while in those days procurement people enjoyed being wined and dined by suppliers. When Lopez arrived in the German headquarters of GM, he found a culture that was content with shaving 2% of a supplier's contract. And this was a culture in which one worked with suppliers that spoke one's language and that were less than 2 or 3 hours away. And this even happened within a company. In practice, GM's division in Germany, called Opel, would predominantly work with German suppliers, while GM's division in the UK, called Vauxhall, would predominantly work with UK suppliers. And this would be repeated on a global scale. GM in North America would again have its own suppliers. And while if you looked a bit closer at North America, you would see that even the North American market was fragmented among GM's divisions and factories. In the video on E3 Supply Market Intelligence, I talk about the heavy books with the addresses of suppliers. And initially, Ignacio Lopez didn't even need these books. What he did in the first years of global sourcing was to make all the suppliers around the world that were already working with one of GM's subsidiaries available to all of GM. And in a stroke of genius, Ignacio Lopez made the procurement people who were already working with a supplier locally responsible for promoting the supplier globally to the other GM subsidiaries. This systematically challenged established suppliers in, say, Germany, with offers coming from Spain or Brazil. A lot has been said and written about this, and many blame global sourcing for a perceived decline in product quality. But I remain convinced that global sourcing came just in time to make automotive suppliers in Europe and in North America more competitive. The 80s and 90s were the heydays of globalization, and global sourcing totally fit the mood of the time. Also in those days, the focus was to achieve cost reduction. Today, globalization is on the retreat and cost reduction has become less of a priority. But global sourcing can still play an important role. With increasing technology content, everything is in flux. Just consider that the semiconductor content of a car is increasing from around $500 for a model with an internal combustion engine to over $2,000 for an electric vehicle. Getting all of this in line requires procurement to bring in the right innovation from the right supplier. And the chance that the current supplier footprint is the correct one for the new electric and self-driving era is close to zero. So there you have it, E1 global sourcing, maybe the oldest method in the purchasing chessboard and the one that could get a new purpose when it comes to sourcing innovation. Okay, now it is your turn. When was the first time that you ran a global sourcing effort and what were the results? Let all of us know in the comments down below, and should you have a question, I will get back to you within 24 hours. Thank you for watching and I see you in the next one. Bye.